All right, welcome to Witchpolice Radio. I always have to preface the shows with this, but I am on the internet. I'm not actually visiting a guest in person, but everyone knows this because we're in a pandemic. But for some reason, I feel compelled to announce that at the beginning of every episode of the podcast. And the guest on this show is someone who is relatively new to me and possibly new to a lot of the listeners as well. So I think the best way to just kick this off is if you want to introduce yourself and just give a bit of background about where you're coming from musically.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Jeff Cottis. My project is under the name of Fuller Hull. I was in the industry, decades ago, and it was a long pause as I did other things. And then, my timing was pretty good. So before I heard the whisper of the pandemic, I decided to start up again. And then it kind of was nice in some ways because it gave me the time to start and maybe try to find my voice a bit as well.
Well, one thing I like about on your website and your Bandcamp and all of your sort of bios is you describe yourself as a philosopher farmer, which I find is an interesting descriptor. So what's the background there? I mean, from what I understand, you've played in a lot of bands over the years, dating back to, past decades, and now you're gone from the city to the country and you're doing this project. Is that right?
Yeah, so, long winding gravel road, I guess is how you describe it. But, back in the 90s, I was with sort of a grunge band called Rigid. And that was probably the one where we did the best, I guess. And then I stopped, and a lot of it was just solo gigs and, smaller, intimate sort of engagements. And we moved around a bit, settled down. And part of that was going to school. So, I was living in Ottawa. I went to Carleton University. I ended up getting my PhD, and that's where the philosopher part comes in. But then a few years back, well, actually, I guess a decade back, we decided to leave the city and move out to the country. We have a small little hobby farm where we have sheep and chickens, and that's the farmer part. So it kind of brings it all together as this, the truth is in a hayfield. It's the sort of mentality that I have.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like the type of music you're playing now, not having heard your grunge stuff in the 90s, but the stuff you're doing with this current project, it seems very well suited, from what I've heard anyway, to that kind of rural, it's quieter, right? It might be a bit way to put it.
Yeah, it's, it's when I grew up, my parents, of course, I was in the 70s and 80s, and they were really influential in terms of sort of classic country. And then when I found my own interest of music, and I really was drawn to that sort of unplugged, MTV unplugged sort of approach, where you could kind of take these heavier songs and strip them down. And then more recently, I just really got into this sort of an alternative kind of folk kind of vibe. So I'm trying to bring those three things together, sort of classic country, 90s unplugged, and alt folk, to give me whatever it is sound that I have, and the one that's going to develop as I go on.
Awesome. Well, you're in a good part of the world, I think, to do that kind of stuff, because Winnipeg has such a strong, and Manitoba in general too, right? There's such a strong support for any kind of folk music, basically, and especially that rootsy kind of country tinge stuff as well. There's such a great infrastructure for it, and so many different artists who have, come out of here and are still here playing that stuff. So I think, it would be hard to pick a better spot in the world, I think, to be playing that kind of rootsy, rural tinge, sort of stuff. So that's hopefully it works out, right?
Yeah, it's accidental in some ways. Before I even really thought of getting back into the game, I bought a used guitar from a guy named Kevin, Mr. K, and so Kevin Crash, and I didn't know anything about the scene. I didn't know much about him, but now I have his old guitar, and it's sort of like, I don't know, the vibe is just sort of kicking through that, and it's sort of pushing me to do more. So we'll see how it takes me. Yeah.
What is it like to start again? I mean, like you said, you played in bands before. You had your whatever your level of success was, and then you had a long break, and now you're starting again. As a solo artist too. What has that kind of process been like to sort of, because you're basically starting from scratch? I mean, with today's music scene, I guess, right?
Absolutely. When I first did it, we had a good group of guys. They had a good network, and I just basically tagged on with them that way, but there was no thought about the business side, about the networking, about the merch, like anything that was to do with the professional approach to music. It just wasn't there. We're just guys hanging out, we're playing, and the industry is is probably tough, and I was probably a bit more thin-skinned, and it just sort of it was a tough slog. A lot of great people helped us out, but it just didn't work out in that respect.
Yeah.
This time around, with the benefit of hindsight, I just made sure that I started to think about it in a much bigger way. And so I reached out to Manitoba Music, and I set up for one of their consultation sessions, and then just started meeting people that way. And then there happened to be a Breakout West conference in the fall. So that was an eye opener for all of the things that I just had to put on my to-do list. And even though I'm not really doing much in terms of, performing or much of the business side, it's really given me a better grounding. Now that I understand what the business is all about, I can kind of focus on the art itself.
Yeah. Do you feel like is it more difficult doing it now? I mean, after, you've gone to school, you have a family, you're not like some 20-year-old kid going out there. Are there barriers that maybe wouldn't have been there or you wouldn't have noticed when you were kind of doing this the first time around?
Yeah, well, I think the first time it was all a blur because it was just fantastically new, and everything was a new venue. It was a new group of people. Just everything was fresh, and now probably with the benefit of hindsight, it's a bit harder in the sense that it's a completely different world now than from before.
Yeah.
But in some ways, it's liberating because I'm really just doing this for myself, I guess, in some respects. If people like it, and if they ever get to hear it in this age, then that's great. But I'm really, really enjoying just sort of being true to what I want to do. And there's really not a lot of extra pressures that way, I think.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, that's a good situation to be in, I think, where you're really only worried about making what you want to make, and you don't have that extra kind of oh crap, what if someone hates this, or because it's new and you're not some 20-year-old kind of trying to make it, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just a matter of taking that and with a healthy dose of realism. Just take it one step at a time for me. I've recorded the album. I've taken care of some of the business aspects. I'm still learning a little bit on the different venues on how to get the message out, whether it's social media or whether it's with physical shows or however the case might be. There's still a lot for me to learn, and I'm sure that, like most people, nobody really has a handle on the industry until many years in, and even less so in this particular time. Nobody really knows how the business works.
Well, one of the questions I've been asking everyone during this time is how has the pandemic affected them as artists? And I mean, like you have, I guess, the benefit of being relatively new with this project. While this is all happening, like you wouldn't have had tours booked or anything like that. I assume that would have got canceled. But what has this situation been like for you? Because you're trying to get your music out there. You can't really play shows because no one can play shows. And what's it been like for you?
Well, generally, I mean, having a farm and working a full-time job and having young kids, I mean, it takes up a lot of time. And one of the things that that the pandemic has provided me is a couple extra hours a day. I don't have that commute to Winnipeg anymore. So because of that, I have newfound time, which I've been able to just use for myself. And you tag on to that you're not going out anywhere. So you find innovative and fun ways of being, entertaining yourself at home. And, I didn't really mean it to become sort of a coping mechanism, but it's been fantastic because it's been a way for me to channel anything that I would normally want to do elsewise into this project. And even though my timing is probably not the best, I mean, I think I recorded with Private Ear Studios, and I signed up, I think it was, I signed my contract with them, I think it was in March
right,
12th.
Right at the beginning of all this.
Yeah, so then everything just locked down, so we had to delay recording, and that took place over the summer. But again, it gave me extra time to realize that I was probably rushing into things, but it gave me that time to kind of refine as I wanted to do and as I needed to, and it's worked out okay. I mean, ideal, no, but it's been pretty good.
Well, now that you're outside of the city, what obviously there's venues you have, like you're saying, you're getting kind of reacquainted with what all the venues are and how to book gigs and everything. Do you have like a a grasp on sort of where you think you would fit in within the Winnipeg music scene? Because obviously there are scenes in smaller communities all around the province, and there's actually a lot of I've had a lot of mainly country artists on the show over the years who have been kind of very successful at touring every small community that no one has ever heard of, and they get the whole town comes out or whatever, and that's a whole circuit, right? But I mean, Winnipeg, I guess, being the biggest city in the province and being kind of the hub, do you sort of have an idea of where you fit, or where you would like to fit within the local music scene here?
I don't, and probably that's part of the business planning side I've got to kind of figure out. But right now, I'm not trying to kind of push into anything just yet. I mean, I think that once we get out from under the thumb of the lockdown, I think that I'll really know. One of the things about being in the country and working in the city is that I sort of have a foot in two worlds in that way. But at the end of the day, when I'm done work, I usually just leave and I want to get back home and do my chores and see the family. So I haven't spent as much time in the different venues, kind of checking out different artists as I probably should have, because I'm just usually coming home. So I guess the other side of it is that because I'm used to driving so much, as country people tend to do. They're kind of always going from one to the next town. I think that there's a good opportunity for me to sort of take my show on the road on a small town basis, because that's really what my songs are about right now. And but there's still influences by the times I lived in the city, and there's still sort of different sides of that. So I'm not really sure, but I guess only time will tell on that one.
What do you think is the kind of driving force behind your songwriting? Are you one of these artists who is very focused on the storytelling aspect of it, or what inspires you, I guess, when you're writing?
It changes. Some of the songs I have on my forthcoming album, I wrote a long time ago.
Okay.
And for me, like, I've never played them, I never record them. They were just for me, and they I think they've held up pretty well. And some of those are a little bit more abstract, I'd say. Perhaps maybe it's age, or just maybe it's a time of life. I mean, I'm not sure, but there tends to be a bit more story narrative running through some of the songs now. So I'm trying to keep it not. I don't want to have any moral to the story.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind that the story just tells itself, but there are certain, like, some of the songs they're very specific, they're very image based, and they're about things that I've actually experienced or I've seen. Others are complete fabrications of an alternative life I've never had. So it really just depends on the mood I was when I was writing it, or what struck me at the moment.
Are there certain songwriters that you would point to as maybe, if they're not obvious influences, but influences on your writing? I
was thinking about this question, and I have like a list, a playlist of songs that have inspired me up into the recording. So I think about Chris Stapleton. I think about Nathaniel Rateliff. William Prince was. I actually saw him last February before the lockdown, and different style, but just the
he's incredible songwriter.
Inspiration of that he has. I mean, it's just, and his story is great as well. In terms of how he transitioned, and it was a very deliberate, again, almost like it was a business move, but it was really following his dream as well. So I think in terms of those, I like to think about the old classic, the country singers as well. I'd be doing them a disservice and myself a dishonesty to compare myself to any of them. But some of the classics are definitely woven in there as well. Okay.
When are you hoping to put out the album? Because I mean, I know you said you started recording right at the kind of beginning of this whole shitstorm we're in right now. So.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be in March, and I just haven't decided if I'm going to put out a physical version just yet, or just release a digital version on Bandcamp and follow it up later on. There's still I might want to add another track, just sort of cap everything off. So
Okay.
I think I'll play it that way, but it will be coming out in March. I've been sitting on it for a while. I'm not in a rush, but I think it's ready, and there's only one way to really know that is to get it out there. So
For sure, yeah. Well, and you have
yeah.
three singles out right now, right?
I do, yeah. I released a 3 sort of as testers and teasers, and I think there's a couple of different models of how to release your songs, and I guess today people are just going single to single to single, but
Yeah.
I think I'm small enough that I can just release the whole thing, and that's going to be just okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah. As someone who is set in his ways and doesn't like to do the whole streaming music thing, I like the idea of an album being released as an album, and you can sort of sit down and start to finish. But I realize that I'm a dinosaur in that sense because everyone is very their attention spans are quite limited as far as listening.
Yeah,
to music.
Yeah, that's true. I think for maybe guys of our vintage, but the sales of vinyl kind of suggests something different, also, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
There's something about the experience, and I mean, we maybe have been through vinyl and cassette and 8-track before that, maybe. But I mean, there is something about it that doesn't die. It just sort of changes a little bit. And
Yep.
And the streaming, what I like about streaming is that I don't need to pick. I just sort of have it preloaded and it goes. And but when I'm really intentional about it, I like to sit on my old phonograph and just sort of plunk a vinyl down and hear the pop and crack and kind of get into it, So
I'm the same way for sure. I don't use any of the streaming services because I think it's because I don't want to be. I have so much stuff that I've amassed over the years, especially local stuff that I kind of hoard. As bad as that word sounds, and the idea of just somehow getting rid of all of it and trusting the cloud to appease me, I don't know. I haven't been able to do it yet. So I still got all these tapes and CDs and records lying around, but it's. There are definitely people who are buying vinyl again, and tapes are making a weird small comeback too, which is kind of cool. But yeah, streaming is still the main source for most people in 2021 to music, right?
Well, the good thing is it gives us options. I mean, I'm like you. I'm balancing out my home inventory as well, and I'm looking at my old vinyl that I maybe don't want anymore. It's like, should I get rid of it? I don't know, but I mean, I think that as long as people have options, they will find a way, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So with the good thing about this being a podcast is, it'll be coming out soon, but someone could hear this next year, and maybe by then the pandemic's over, and maybe you'll have the record out. So what's the best way to find out more information about what you're doing and to hear the music you have out whenever someone's hearing this podcast?
Yeah, well, you can go straight to my website. I've tried to have a landing page in there, so that takes you out to all the different streaming services. But the website is www.fullerhull.ca.
Okay.
It's populated, but it will become more so. You can get a link to my singles, and then once I have events, they'll be posted there as well. And then once the album's ready, should be available there as well.
Cool. What is the significance behind Fuller Hull? I mean, I assume that was your actual name when we first started talking, but clearly it's not. So why that name? Why did you choose that?
It came up in my doctoral studies, and I just I got to a point, and for anybody who's done graduate school work, it's a dark, lonely existence sometimes, and you ask yourself, like, why am I here? And I realized that for me, the activity of learning, the progress that you make in learning is for me, it's insatiable. I want to know more every day.
Yeah. And
in a way, I want to get fuller. And if you think of your head as a vessel, as a hull of some sort of storage capacity, it's like a boatload of information I'm looking for. So the term Fuller Hull just sort of came up as this accidental description of me learning, and it just sort of carried over into well, this is a whole new learning experience as well. So it's quite appropriate, I think.
I definitely wasn't expecting that kind of an answer. I don't know what I was expecting, but that's completely not. It's cool though. It makes sense. Yeah, I get it.
And right now, it's a solo act, right? Yeah. And I don't think it will always be that way. And hopefully, I can fill it out as well. And if if once I demonstrate some proof of concept, and if I start to meet people who are of like mind and similar schedules, then maybe that could open up. And that way it doesn't become the Jeff Cottis project. It's something bigger, So that's really the thought behind it.
Well, it could, Fuller Hull could be a person's name, it could be a band name. It's mutable, yeah, for sure. Right on.